The San Rafael Eco Village. How can we create the most ecological village that can be created? This is the question that we ask our schools, our students, in collaboration with local architects to imagine. So the first thing to think about is the sleep module. Now, it's very beneficial in many ways to create a sleep module that is separate from those facilities that only get used a small percentage of the time. For example, the stove might be on an hour a day. And when you have a burner on in a stove, it takes just as much gas or electricity to cook a pot of soup for 30 people as it does for one person. It takes just as much space. But the difference is that 30 people don't all have to make the soup. And so the first thing to consider would be the ecological space. And this can be a whole host of things. Students can compete to find the most effective way to sleep, to store basic possessions, and the goal is quality of life per energy unit invested. So if this is 8 feet long, we have a nice little shelf here, and the bed is at the proper height for sitting, so you can sit right here. And you have a table that folds down right here. Now you've got a bed and a workspace, a desk space, a laptop space. And if the bed is up that high off the floor, now you've got storage space under the bed. And you can have deep storage, which is accessed underneath the mattress back here, where you take off the mattress and you fold up the lid, and you've got deep storage for stuff you only need a few times a year, paperwork, etc. And then you've got short-term storage, clothing, etc. here. And what's the most ecological light when you have a small space? A single LED light. What is the design? So this is the challenge for our students to develop a sleeping space. Then you have the toilet space. And one possibility for a toilet design it would be a multi-bay toilet with outside ventilation, so that while it may be a bit nippy in the winter, by having a doorway design where you have a wall and then go in and have another wall, and then you have your toilet space along with an occupancy sign. And this brings up another point, because one of the things that we do as a default is we prepare for the lowest cost or the lowest denominator in human beings. We assume people will be rude, violent, etc., etc. And so we spend inordinate amounts of money on different locks and all kind of contingencies to protect against the stupidity we expect from our fellow human beings. And that brings up a really good point, which is that when we teach respect, for example, if we have a cultural protocol as a membrane for entering the ecological village, we now have an opportunity to cultivate, screen for, and measure values and behaviors that allow us to save resources, to increase enjoyment, and save time. See, because when we're looking at ecology, we're looking at value per energy invested. Now, on the earth and material front, we're looking at the quality of life per natural resources consumed. So obviously, a sleeping pod, and if we go to the high end of natural on one side of the spectrum, we might use some of the earth-pressed bricks from Elon Musk's tunnel, which he's volunteered to give away to our homeless, and tie that in with examining where it is that we would like to have a tunnel that can be done for $10 million per mile each way. So it's a single car tunnel, $10 million per mile. But you consider things like the Bay Bridge renovation, where you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and enormous disruption and delay for not much more than a mile. And so then the question is, well, is that a situation for a tunnel? Well, there are plenty of those situations where a boring company tunnel is cheaper than the default infrastructure, and in those cases, there are millions of bricks free for the homeless. So, coming back to our stall, when we invest in people, when we invest in the ethics and decency of people, and make that an important part of the design, it allows us a lot more flexibility, because now we've got an air-ventilated roof that needs just a little sign saying occupied or not occupied. And what goes on in here? Well, you can have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 separate toilets, and you can use conventional plumbing. That may be an option. However, what if the ideal toilet place is in a depression and you don't want to have to spend energy to pump it uphill? Well, now you've got composting toilets, which Bill Gates has invested, I believe it's $200 million in leading-edge, high-efficiency composting toilets that are, way above anything that's been done to date, and save money, save time, and save energy, and actually create bacteria-free fertilizer that's a higher degree of sanitary material than anything on the market to date. So now we come to the need for we have a need. We have a certain number of sleeping pods. We have a certain number of toilets that mean that no one will ever be waiting for a toilet. And we also, by having it separate, perhaps by a little, breezeway, that helps with ventilation, with smell, and the feeling of separation. Maybe this is a hand washing area. And the key with an ecological village is to reinvent and re-examine everything that takes place. You see, there's some diets that depend on food being shipped regularly in refrigerated containers from around the world. Well, what does the most ecological diet look like? Well, it's obviously spending as little energy as possible transporting things, particularly in a fossil fuel economy, transporting things from around the world. And so if we create a garden that requires the lowest amount of energy to grow things, and then create recipes that require the lowest amount of energy to, in a very healthy way, because when you're looking at ecology, we're looking at a number of different dimensions. We're looking at the health of the body. We're looking at the energy expenditure to create the village. We're looking at the energy expenditure to feed the village. We're looking at the energy expenditure and lifespan of each of the different modules. We're looking at the amount of garbage generated. And we're looking at the culture. For example, in a culture of high crime and bullying, you need a lot of investment in security cameras. So what's the kind of culture? What are the emotional variables that lead to more sociopathic people? And what are the emotional variables that lead to kinder and more empathic people? And one of the things is proximity. When people commit crimes, they turn their attention on their own loved ones, their own family, and their own crisis, their own need, their own goals, and they ignore the damage, the grief, the loneliness, the horror, the sadness of the people they commit the crime to, because they're not in their face. And that ties in with the awareness that several leading sociologists and anthropologists have talked about the fact that you want to keep a space at 150 people or less in order that you have the kind of emotional impact and empathy that comes with a project of this nature. You need to be able to have regular proximity with everyone in the village in order to treat them as a human being, which then naturally leads to caring, which reduces the expense needed to manage theft and rape and various abuses, corruption, etc., because these are your people. But you cannot feel that they're your people. It's a head trip, basically, unless you have regular interaction with 150 people or less. So we're looking then at a village that might start at 130 people. And the question is, who can create a design for this village that includes a cultural metric, a dietary metric, a health metric with health cost metrics? I mean, wouldn't it be nice if rather than continually escalating healthcare costs, we actually created a module of a culture in which healthcare costs were 1/3 the cost of the surrounding modules, because the activity, socially, mentally, and physically, was 2/3 more healthy. From beginning and engaging people in building their own tiny houses, which means exercise and self-confidence and hope for the future because you come away learning new skills. And animals are a beautiful regulating force. And so having an area where, within the village, a design for dogs, which help cure PTSD as an example. Chickens, which can bring eggs. A place where you have interest. I don't know if you know this, but wild bantam hens and chickens, when they're wandering through like ornamental grasses and things, they are a part of art. They're a piece of the landscape. So the goal would be that this place can sleep 130 people and be expandable to 150. So you don't want it to be, too rigid. And we want to look at recycled materials, energy consumed, materials consumed, money to create, physical health, energy consumed in the growing and creation of food. You want to look at aesthetics, a beautiful place to live. Art, tying in with aesthetics, what's the place and context and quality of art? You want to look at learning. In the process of building the village, how many people will learn something useful? You want to look at quality of social life. For example, if you have a yoga studio that has free morning classes to all residents in a space here, you've just taken 20% of the physiological, psychological stress out of the community. You've just increased the health of the community. And you've just had 15 interactions with people in your community that helps build a sense of love and belonging, which is Abraham Maslow's third hierarchy of human needs: survival, security and survival, love and belonging. And so what we have here, what's emerging, is happening on a number of different levels. The first level it's happening on is creating a destination worth visiting in San Rafael. Now, would you like to go and see the most ecological village in California, designed by students mentored by architects? Yes or no? I would be there regularly. So you've got the dimension of an attraction, something that adds an element of diversity, value, beauty to both local residents and national and international tourists. It becomes a destination worth visiting. Okay, so we've got that dimension. Now, as a destination worth visiting, it generates more money coming into the local economy than the entire thing costs, which means that if this is done well, and given the publicity that it deserves and will receive, both on local city websites, on blogs, etc., and we can partner with environmental blogs around the world. People enjoy. When I travel around the world, I make a point of checking places like this out because they're more interesting than another 5-star hotel. So now we've got a tourist destination, an added quality of life for San Rafael, and we've got something that brings in more money for local business than it costs. So we're good there. Now, what about the environment? Well, in order for the winning design to win, this has to use less energy, less electricity, less wood, less steel per person than any other design in Marin County. And the goal is as little as possible. And one of the things that brings this into a scientific level and makes it a valuable information age export is doing calculations. You see, because with every school, with every student who is required to, well, who wants to submit a design for their school or their team or their individual, they have to show measurements. How much electricity is used in generating light? How much electricity is used in transporting their design for light fixtures from wherever they're manufactured and located, which of course gives an incentive for things to be made right here in San Rafael when you have to calculate the amount of CO2 generated by a ship for 6 months on the ocean per pound, etc. It encourages, it gives the local economy an advantage by saving energy. So now we've got calculations on, let's say, 10 different groups. I would find this a blast to put together with a local architect, and I might not qualify if it was students only. So I might be a mentor with an architect to partner with a student body. But let's say we get 10 submissions, and every one of them has scale drawings. Every one of them calculates the energy consumed, the benefits to the environment. Let's say we aim to be a net CO2 generator. Well, that we create more oxygen than we generate. Is that possible? How close can we get to that? So we now have 10 designs, any one of which is going to be 10 times better than anything that exists in Marin. Because from this perspective, from a high quality, low cost environmental design. And a really big issue is money. Meaning one of the goals would be to, land costs aside, spend less than $20,000 per person. So if we have 130 people, what we have is a budget of $130,000. Now this then brings in the dimension of volunteers. Because if you know how to host a party, if you know how to put on an event that draws people in where they want to help volunteer, well, your design wins. Because that's built into your budget. Party budget, we're going to have $10,000 of prizes, gifts, and parties while this is being built. And we're going to reward the local contractors who show up and volunteer a day or so to do this. We're going to appreciate the builders who loan us the pressurized nail guns, the architects who do this and that and the other. And so we've got a dimension of value per dollar spent. Now, the winning design will have a point system. You can't argue with calculations of energy spent. So there'll be a certain number of points for aesthetic. There'll be a certain number of points for quality of life. And there will be a certain number of points for saving money, saving electricity, saving this, etc. And so what we're producing is 10 world-class designs for 130 people to be housed for less than $20,000 a piece in a higher quality of life than's ever been built. Now that's an interesting goal. Now, I'm making this in a context. There's a backdrop. The city of San Rafael is responsible for generating 300 of the 1,000 to 2,000 homeless people in Marin County. And the question is, how can a town take responsibility for the people it's made homeless? And one of the ways to do that is to invite our homeless. I was talking with a great contractor the other day. He's 65. He used to build houses. He's sitting in the cold on the curb on 3rd Street, fighting cancer. And he'd be happy to help with expertise and interest in helping our homeless here. Now, there's another issue, which is that San Rafael doesn't have the budget currently allocated for low-cost housing that it needs to take care of its own. You know, it's got $1 million to $2 million in its budget. Well, at $650,000 a pop, which is what it currently takes to build a new unit in San Rafael, you don't get to house many people. So what? You blow your budget and you've taken 2 out of 300 people and you've gotten them housed. So we're looking at a protocol in which our homeless can learn skills, social skills, carpentry skills, artistic skills, and discipline, all of which are needed to rehabilitate someone. We're looking at an animal protocol which can help with PTSD and emotional regulation. And this is a way to turn enemies into allies, liabilities into assets. we're currently wasting the lives, the energy, and the resources of a good, 1,500 plus people in this county. Why not give them a chance to do something meaningful in a way that they can? Because one of the benefits of building small space is anyone can figure it out. You and I can measure 8 foot by 4 foot and get out a handsaw and build a little muscle. Why a handsaw? Well, it depends. Depends on the experience of the person. Handsaws build muscle. They create routine. They don't make noise. And they don't need insurance. It's pretty hard to cut an arm off with a handsaw. It's not too hard with a chainsaw or a skill saw. And so safety is one of the metrics. Can we build something like this without any accidents? Can we build it with volunteers? Can we train people as we're building it? These are exciting parts of the design, and you cannot answer the question instinctively. You have to see a set of guidelines and a set of protocols. Now that includes a protocol for engaging volunteers. But at the end of this, we have 130 people housed and fed and managing an attraction, showing people around, teaching them. Now this is a very important psychological metric because we treat our homeless like dirt. So when our homeless build something more intelligent than any of us have done, because frankly, none of us have built anything this intelligent. And when our homeless do that, number one. 2, live there and model that. And number 3, take people on tours around that who come to see them. You've got a healing protocol that heals the most damaging and difficult thing to heal in the homeless psychology. Or it's really the homeless ecology, because not feeling valuable is a result of being treated dirtily for months or years. Well, the obvious remedy is to treat someone with respect. But you can't force respect. And we only respect people who teach things usefully or have money. So this turns our people into a valuable asset, healing a psychological scar of worthlessness. It's a beautiful possibility. Now, one could say, well, we can't just do this. Everyone would want to live there. And it's true, there might be a good 1,000 people in Marin County that would love to participate and live in one of these places. Well, let's start with one. And if it does cost less money, improve health, reduce health costs, bring in tourist revenue, bring positive press to San Rafael, make it a more interesting town to live in. If it does rehabilitate and give some of our homeless work, if it does house some of our homeless, if it does use less electricity per person than any other structure in California, if it brings people together and teaches life skills and helps to heal PTSD, and does it for less money than any other thing on the market, well then let's have another one. And if it doesn't, see, you learn a lot through failing. You learn a lot through failing. Pain is one of the greatest teachers. Well, we've got something new. Will there be failure? Of course. And there will be learning. A teenage kid is going to come up with a design for his module and be building it and discover, after spending 5 or 6 days with a saw, that there's a better way to do it. And that's a good thing. We've got one more teenager who's confident that if they need to, they can build their own house, who feels a sense of meaning and purpose because they've helped to house someone who's elderly, someone who in our culture needs a house and doesn't have one. We've given meaning, purpose, and confidence to a teenager and helped them grow through failure. Now, I started my entire business at 17 with the help of mentors. I hired 6 mentors, leaders in the field with more than 200 years of combined expertise: septic system design, horticulture, heavy equipment operation, irrigation, design and layout, and concrete and concrete finishing. These were my mentors, the top in the field. And any time I had a new project, I'd call the people involved and I'd say, you know, this is the goal, this is the situation, what's the best thing for the client, for the customer? And they'd tell me. And I'd pay them whatever they wanted to be paid to be my leading mentor. Now, do you think I learned a few things at 17 years old? Of course I did. I built my first house on time and on budget at age 23. I built it no money down. It sold for above appraised value in a down market. People loved that house. Did I learn something useful? Of course. Those skills allow me to make a contribution. But many of our young people do not seek out mentors. How do I know this? I've never been asked to be a mentor once by a young person wanting to start a business. And the 2 women who asked me to be mentors didn't have the appreciation that I had for my mentors. They didn't understand how valuable someone who has 20, 30, 40 years of experience can be. The teens who work with mentors in order to create something like this will understand the value of a mentor. And they may have a mentor relationship with someone in business if they maintain that relationship for the rest of their life. That's a valuable gift. So let's see. We have taken 130 homeless people off the street. Now, one of the things that's a little bit interesting here that also makes this self-funding is that I interview, for my work and stuff, I interview homeless in Marin all the time. And they all live. And they often manage their money very badly. One person can't afford a train ticket up and down every day from Petaluma, where her stray cats, she goes to feed her cats. And then she comes back down here. Now, she can't afford a monthly ticket. But she always has $20 to go back and forth. Well, $20 times 30, we've got $600 right there. That's what she's spending as a homeless person on train fare every day. Well, what if her cats could move in here and she contributed that $600 not to a train, but to actual living expenses. Another person could pay $300, but there's nothing available for less than $1,000. You see, and so there are a lot of people that can pay very, very easily for something this thoughtful and that small, where the mortgage is $20,000. Well, what about land costs? Well, what about land costs? Where I have an apartment in Thailand, Americans are not allowed to own land because the Thai government cares about the Thai people being able to afford land, and they don't want us doing to the Thai people what we've already done to our own people, namely speculatively drive up the market to such an extent that a Thai person making $300 a month can't afford their own home. So Americans can't buy land, a smart move by the Thai government. But they can lease. They can do 30-year leases. And they don't cost very much. So we have a 30-year lease that cash flows, preferably by the residents inside. And we have a 30-year exemption from all building codes to do an ecological educational project. Now, are the students better ahead for having this opportunity? Is the city better ahead for having this opportunity? Are business owners better ahead for this opportunity, both by bringing in people to tour the eco-village and by not having homeless people crowding the streets? It doesn't bring out a feeling of luxury when there's 3 homeless people camped out outside your business. So luxury customers don't make as many sales. Now, for that matter, what if private enterprise partnered with specific homeless people in their regions, because there is a measurable cost to business of not responding to our homeless issue? Business sales go down, business rents go down, businesses default because we don't have our act together. Now, is it good for local business? Is it good for our homeless? Is it good for our culture? Is it good for our future? Is there anyone that comes up a loser because 130 people are housed in 8 by 10 magnificent tiny houses rather than minimum 1,200 square foot buildings? I don't think so. There is plenty of land for this type of thing. One could even partner with the Park Service, and here's how. There's no question that having 130 sleeping areas, now, and keep in mind, these can, in different situations, be buried. They can be buried into a vertical existing slopes, like a hobbit. They can also have, grass or edible roofs. There's a variety of different designs that minimize impact, that minimize visual impact and ecological impact. But there is no doubt that, for example, were we to put one of these in a park, for example, out at China Camp, that the ecology would take a hit, meaning that there would, it's not that the state would take a hit, but activities that are currently going on in our streets and in illegal places, etc., would be taking place on a park. Now, we view, generally speaking, parks as absolutely, well, we view people as absolutely destructive to nature because that's what we do. We destroy nature, and then we see that we have to keep people away from nature because people destroy nature. But what if you flip that around? What if you say, in an eco-village, we help nature, and you establish the metrics? Now, one of the more important ones is CO2, and this ties in with trees. Now, if each person plants 500 trees in a national park, they have generated a net surplus of oxygen. They are more than carbon neutral. This is a calculation that can be done. And we can create an impact module that says each person that moves into an eco-village in a discrete and aesthetically pleasing area of public land will create a net benefit. They will contribute to park maintenance with time, reducing the risk of fire. There are dead branches all over Marin just waiting to burn because we don't allocate enough money to clean up the mess. And we say we don't have it. Okay, so how about some volunteers? So we reduce fire risk. We plant 500 trees per person. 250 trees, I would add, is enough. If you plant 250 trees, the amount of CO2 you generate in your car and other ways will be offset. Well, these people don't have cars. This is a car-free community. We're dealing with bicycles and electric tricycles. It's a car-free space. Why? It's more ecological that way. Why? So nothing needs to be set aside for parking. So you don't need to spend a ton of money on concrete paving. Native wood chips provided by local arborists can easily provide the trails through these areas. This is a very flexible module. It can be done in sizes of between 30 people and up to 150 people. You can have volunteers pick up more trash than is generated, recycle more materials than are manufactured, plant more trees than the oxygen consumed, be carless. And now, if we can reduce fire risks, if we can improve the aesthetics of our parks without having to use taxpayer money, if we improve the diversity of planted trees in our parks, if we improve wildlife, one of the problems we deal with is ticks, Lyme disease, and overpopulation of deer. Well, there are places, for example, in New York, they just spent $4 million for the Park Service to reduce the deer population in a humane way. How about giving a hunting permit to people in the eco-village to harvest venison and turn it into something interesting, ecological, organic, and delicious to sell that doesn't cost the Park Service anything and allows more native vegetation to grow? Because we're responsible for increasing the deer population. That's not a natural phenomenon. There's nothing against deer, but they are a protein source. And there is a lot of money. I'm a landscape contractor. There's a lot of money that my clients spend to keep deer out of their garden. It's an average of $10,000 a house to keep deer out of the garden. That's half the cost of these homes. So a competition, a tourist attraction, an educational opportunity, a money-making opportunity, a humane step towards being more civilized to our most undervalued citizens, some of them veterans, who risked their lives and lost friends to protect our quality of life, while we also risk their lives to protect our quality of life. It's an imbalanced equation. I'm willing to die to protect your quality of life, and we're willing to ignore you to protect our quality of life. It's a bit selfish. And it's a reality. It's one of the reasons suicide is so high among the veteran population. And it's tremendously sad that we don't know how to honor our people. There are no losers in this scenario, except for a small minority that are so bound into the status quo that the idea of even the slightest change upsets their sense of normalcy, because they are comfortable with 1,500 homeless people wandering around with nowhere to go. And they're comfortable paying $1.2 million for the average home in Marin. But they're not comfortable with change. And this is a change of a very healthy and intelligent nature. I invite you to join me in making this a reality in San Rafael.